Hey there, listener. Welcome to the Deep Share Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Rouse, and for the last couple of decades, I've slowly been opening my eyes to a very different world than the one I grew up hearing about. And the more conversations I have with interesting people, the more mystifying this world becomes. So without further ado, let's get deep.
We've got science to celebrate! Demons bliss out! After what, baby? Come on!
There is rebellion in the wind. It will crush.
Everything I've said is true. It's real.
Dinosaur fossils? God put those here to test our faith.
A damn lie. I saw them with my own eye.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
We did illusions, man! None of it is true!
I'm not insane!
This is mass madness, you maniacs! In God's name, you people are the real thing! We are the illusion!
Welcome back to the Deep Share Podcast. Tonight, I am honored to finally talk to a wonderful podcaster that I've witnessed podcasting for years now, and she's been on a lot of big shows. She's got a lot of great things to say. Please welcome Monica Perez. Monica, nice to see you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's great to finally get to sit down together. We were on a Union of the Unwanted like 2 years ago, and I don't think we really got to converse at all, but it was one hell of an experience for sure, being able to hang with all of you guys at that point in this career of mine. So,
and you know, some of the folks in the Pacific Northwest who I recently kind of toured up there, which was super, super fun.
Yes, we have mutual friends,
We
Chud
do.
and Lonnie. They
And,
are
and
Lanny,
Joe from Legit Back.
Joe
Right.
and Jen,
Yes,
and
yes.
we have a lot of good people in this community, and it's so
Yeah.
cool that you got to go visit them. you
Oh my
know?
gosh, it was such a great experience. Like, I
Yeah.
can't even tell you. It was so good for the soul. And it's going to be good for my wallet because I am going to figure out how to make my own fermented beverages. And by that, I do not mean things that get you high. Those I make plenty of. I just mean, like, I love those like sparkly, zingy, gingery things. And they're like freaking $3.50 a bottle. And I won't bring myself to drink them. Like, as my husband said when I used to smoke cigarettes, he's like, why do you do that? It doesn't even get you high.
That's a good point.
Okay. Yeah, it was a great point. So I cannot pay for liquids that, you know, have no calories and don't get you high, but I will. I really am gonna, it's life-changing. Lanny taught me how to make sauerkraut and
wow.
pickled green beans for my Bloody Marys and a lot of other things. So I'm super psyched.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lanny is a huge inspiration. I love all the stuff that they're doing up there. And yeah, my wife and I kind of hung out and met Lanny and Chud at right around the time that we were starting to get into making our own things at home too. We've got a garden, and now the beverages, tapache. I had never heard that word
gotten
before.
to that.
Oh,
Which one is that? Because
The
I know
tapache.
kombucha is like the tea with the gross fungus stuff on top.
Yeah. Oh man, my
Um,
wife would kill me. I can't remember the name. The SCOBY. Yes, the SCOBY.
Yeah,
layer.
exactly.
Yes.
What's tapache? What's tapache?
Tapache is very similar. It's fermented, and it's all pineapple. So you take some pineapple juice, and then you take the skin of the pineapple, dump that in there.
Really?
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. And then to me, so as a former alcoholic, I don't even say I'm still, whatever. I'm former. I don't drink it anymore.
Right.
And that tastes like a refreshing, light Belgian beer on a hot
Wow.
day.
Does
without
that not
getting me
lead
drunk.
you
So
down
it's
the
great.
path? Does that not lead you down
No,
the
oddly
path?
enough, I'll just chug a ton of the
Well,
tapache.
I have to say, I just I cannot handle the calories of, constant stream of alcohol. So I've been transitioning to like the occasional CBD gummy, a few drops of CBD, and with one of those like kvass things, it hits the spot. Like I'm with you there. I think it's like transformational. And I feel like it's so great to move. It's kind of like when you get out of debt, like you pay off your school loans or whatever, and you go from paying interest to earning interest.
Right.
Like you go from like, this makes me feel like crap tomorrow. It's like, this makes me feel good tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like that's a delta that I really can get my arms around.
Yeah, I think I see more and more of that. I mean, maybe it's just the influence of the community we're in, and there's so much motivation to do better with ourselves and each other and stuff like that. So whatever the reason, I see more and more people trying to make their own way in whatever way that means. People are making their own clothes, growing their own food.
Well, then
So
you
I think it's
realize
good.
how cheap it can be, like how much you do not really need to plug into the matrix. And then you can have fun and have leisure. I can't get too far. Like I always made this mistake is that like when I grew up totally poor as the youngest of 9 and just like completely nothing, I thought I had to like become an investment banker to have my own room, and it's like, there is like, you only need to get like 10% out of too poor to be completely fine, especially if your favorite hobby is to read books. I feel like you just need, depending on if you need image, if you need luxury, if you need like constant stimulation, then yes, you're going to have to get out there and like make the fiat. But I think for the rest of it, I'm happier without it. And it was so like great to just hang out with those guys.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
just great. Anyway, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
all
would
for the latest movement. Back to nature.
Man, I used to live up in Oregon. That was pretty close to those guys. And if I was still there, I'd be up there as much as I possibly could visiting there. It's so cool. So many of you guys are out there. So you kind of have a nice community to kind of visit each other. Like Joe and Jen get visitors often in the podcasting community. It's not fair.
And plus, as it's like more oppressive. So we also visited people in the Portland area. And as like people get super crazy and irrational, there emerges like these kind of countercultural reactionary movements where they're like, screw this, I'm not even going to work anymore. Like and like in LA, my kids went, there are schools and churches and stuff. There's like Latin masses. And I feel like it's that people just are reacting. And sometimes reactionary stuff is not good, but in this case, definitely good.
Right. I mean, it's cognitive dissonance where we're so like, I'd find myself judging every stance I take, like, oh, am I falling for something? And it's like, eventually I might not be falling for something, right? Like this could be genuine, right? Like everything is a controlled reaction, right? That loop.
Things that are inherently good that you can just tell by looking at it. And a lot of times they take something that's inherently good and that's what they exploit. Like that's what they leverage. So yeah, I mean, you're going to find some threads that like you don't want to pull on there, but
right.
But the closer you get to that, I feel like the more you're kind of activating that archetype of autonomy. And I just feel like it's worth it. And you develop like the truth jar. So you kind of get to where you're not going to fall, the more in touch you get with nature and with like the reality of being able to grow your own food, like the less susceptible you are to bullshit because you don't even need screens anymore. You're not even absorbing the bullshit anymore.
Right.
Until they come to take your rainwater and your chickens and your guns. So you have to pay attention to the laws.
Yeah, that's after the fear mongering doesn't work where, oh, water is poison now.
Right.
Don't drink any
Yeah.
Farming can give you heart attacks and stuff. Unbelievable. The amount of, it's just insane how it just goes. They just play on everything. They constantly focus on that duality within us. And it's like, we love it. We can't help but love the this versus that mentality, even though we're aware of it most of the time. Like, so let me ask you personally, because you know a lot more about politics. You have your finger on like those kind of narratives a lot more than I do, who's usually got his head stuck in the past, the ancient past. How do you deal with the political narratives out there? Like, do you see any good politicians out there whatsoever? Because I have a very hard time with that when a lot of our colleagues and people I respect definitely are very invested into what they can expose about politics, which kind of scares me. And it makes me a little nervous because I feel like that might be their primary playing field to feed us nonsense from left to right, right to left, back and forth. Sorry for that roundabout way.
The first question about like, is anybody real? And then the second question you're going to have to re-ask because I'm confused.
That's totally fine.
But so let's take Ron Paul. Okay. I love Ron Paul, everything he says and does. I don't like, I've never heard him say 9/11 was an inside job. He obviously knows it was. Like, there's no question. He doesn't know it was. And I forgive him for that. Like, it could be because, like, he's there to admit everything except for that, but he never tells you it wasn't. Like, you never hear him say, like, I bet my reputation on the fact that, Osama bin Laden did this. So I don't take that too seriously. But if, let's say he was a limited hangout for some reason. Like, I don't care at all, because it's like Martin Luther King or Thomas Jefferson. I mean, there are the scandals and bad things said about them that are, likely to be true, but it's irrelevant. I mean, they had a message. They did a lot of good. Their message was a threat, whether I don't think any of them got those messages put in their mouths, but even if they did, like some of the stuff that Trump did, like, I feel like the powers that be, they see those threats, they see the things they don't like, they have to construct a controlled opposition, or they have to co-opt somebody who's already there. So anytime I hear somebody who's really got their finger on, like, the pulse of the American experiment, like Ron Paul, that was not a bad thing. It sucks that he didn't make it, but, like, I completely embrace him. Rand Paul compromises a lot more, and there have been a couple of things where, like with the lab leak theory, which I think is a cover up for the fact that it was deliberately spread through injections.
Right.
That's a cover up and a distraction. And I think something he did kind of led to the USA Freedom Act, which, like, he stood his ground on something and it just ushered in, like, something much worse. It was totally foreseeable. I'm not saying that he is a controlled person, but he compromises. And look, he's a senator, being and Mitch McConnell, like, allowed that. So if that's what it took, then maybe he feels like he's gonna, it's worthwhile. Then you have, like, Justin Amash, whatever they like, from, I think, Minnesota. He used to, every time there was a vote in Congress, he would explain his vote on a constitutional basis on his Facebook page. And that not only explained his vote, but it explained everything that you needed to know. I mean, it was a resource. It was from the best resource out there. And all of a sudden he stopped doing that. He, like, became an independent. He called for Trump's impeachment, which was a ridiculous way. It was a setup, and it was a way to get the left to love Ukraine, to want to send money to Ukraine, because it was all about him not sending money to Ukraine. And I said it at the time. I was like, I'm pretty sure this means we're sending money to Ukraine, because right. So Amash just disappeared from the scene. He doesn't do that anymore. And I would say, like, the only even explanation I can think of is that they got to him. They had to, like, he's a vulnerable person. He has kids and whatever. So I feel like, kind of a long-winded answer to your question, it's almost guaranteed that anybody who's going to have real political power is going to be compromised in some way or undermined. I mean, these are people who can kill you, who blackmail you, who can, probably steal your mind. They can. And I feel like, so I think of the political atmosphere as more of a litmus test of how far they can go. So I feel like the politicians the ones we like the most, is really more of a litmus test of the kind of where we are, of where the awake people are, like how much they have to give the people who can still think, still remember, like, what the American kind of promise was. Because that's the other thing. They say we have this social contract. I'm like, okay, I didn't sign up for that. I don't believe in that. However, if there is one, it's the Constitution, right? That's your argument. So let's at least stick to that. And that's why I did not like the transition from Ron Paul to Trump. Is that I think there's no question that Trump was given to us. And what saddened me is that what got people really excited about him was that he was mean to people who had been jerks to us.
Right.
So, and I'm
Revenge.
like, yeah. And I get that, I get that like, there's just a lot of years of frustration. You feel like you're being vindicated, but Ron Paul I feel like he vindicated us much more by getting college students to burn dollar bills. Like, to me, that's a vindication of everything. That's people really understanding at a deep level how far we had gone. And what I feel like Ron Paul had demonstrated was that like me, like I myself, I grew up, raised by my father's a traditional conservative, which I always thought was a libertarian, but it's not quite. But he was a traditional conservative, and as I developed politically and philosophically, and I looked back at that stuff, I could really understand the principles at work and what was wrong with what was happening politically. So I just stumbled into the radio show that I had. It just stumbled into it. It's a long story I've told many times, but so when I was completely cynical, like a complete anarchist by then. And I didn't know how I would possibly do a radio show to a bunch of conservative people, like neoconservatives. And actually, Angela McArdle, who's the head of the Libertarian Party, asked me recently, and I didn't have the right answer for her then, but I realized now what the answer was, because I'd gone through the questions like, how do you reach conservatives? And I asked, I'll have to write a blog post dedicated to her to answer the question, because I looked at the time, I was like, I cannot do a radio show. And I realized that the one thing that we would all have in common was the Bill of Rights, not because I believe in the Constitution and want to limit it. It's that the Bill of Rights limits the Constitution, whether you believe it in or not. So use the Bill of Rights to defend yourself against this government, whether you want that particular government or not. It is your defense. And conservatives all understood that. And what I noticed when I was on the air is like just an avalanche of relief and connection with the conservatives who said, like, why doesn't anyone else talk about this? These are the principles. And Atlanta's half Black, or like there's a huge African-American community there. And these are not, conservatives for the most part. And I had a tremendous reaction from that. The station had very low listenership from the African-American community. And the majority of my callers were maybe 50-something-year-old Black guys who were just like, yes, like it's a scam, whatever your ideological bent is, like falling for all this propaganda it's just never, it's like a ping pong ball. Like they bullshit on one side and bullshit on the other side. Like, when are people really going to wake up?
Right. Two wings of the same bird.
Right. To the point where 10 years ago, people were like, oh, you're woke, which meant something different. They metamorphose those things.
They take them.
Yeah. So I realized that we did have this really profound, like archetypal understanding of what we were promised, like our legacy, our inheritance from our fathers, who, even if they fought in wars that weren't justified, when you get into the State Department memos, they were bringing to it ideology that they were willing to give their lives for, and they were passing those words and thoughts and values down to us. And I feel like even when Ron Paul was out there, I was so and when I had my show, I was really hopeful, because I thought they cannot eradicate that. They cannot eradicate that. And then Trump came, and I remember I was at a party, and I said to a guy who's like a fighter pilot, hardcore, like, America, fuck yeah. And he was just loved Trump, and he thought he loved me. Like, this guy was like, you really know, your Eighth Amendment,
Right.
And I was like, and I said, but look, like, Trump never talks about the Bill of Rights. And he said, well, you can't have it all. And I was like, you can't, that's what you need, because those are the limits. So if you start being pragmatic about, well, we're in power now, so we need to get rid of the filibuster, we're in power now, so we need blah, blah, blah. That's the setup. That's why that's why the liberals can't argue against like aid to Ukraine, because they went to the mat for that. And you get co-opted by it. And that's what I think he did, is that he got people to say compromise was okay. And another person, I've said this so many times, when I would get on the air and just say Obama does not pay attention to the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. And then I said the same thing about Trump, and the answer with Obama, it was like, yeah, he's a Manchurian candidate. And then with Trump, they would say, this was the quote, you're quibbling about semantics, because I would quote the Constitution, like the Constitution is like 2 pages, like what you really need from it, it's just not very long.
Right.
there's no quibbling about semantics. Like there are like not that many words there. You have to follow them all. And I just, so I feel like that was the death knell. And I guess like the two-parter is that I feel like that was where you're really not even going to have like real, foundational American philosophy ever emerging. Maybe Thomas Massey, but, and then on the other hand, if you do get anywhere, they will put you down.
Right.
So.
Well, that was a great answer.
It was a very long-winded
No.
answer. So neither of us is going to remember the second part, but it was like people,
yeah. Something about, I think I said something about left versus right, but we kind of covered a little
are
bit
people
of that
falling on
anyway.
their swords for this stuff? And
well, yeah, I mean, there's so much compartmentalization too. I'm very interested in the UFO community, and I have been for a long time, right? And that's like the crux of the compartmentalization. That's where you hear that word the most when it comes to government conspiracy. It's like, well, this person didn't know that, he didn't even know what he was working on. That's why he didn't know it was reversed engineer, that whole line of thinking. And that's where I find my cognitive dissonance when it comes to politics, economics, celebrities, musicians, because of course in our community, depending on who you talk to, all of those people are actors. All of those people might be CGI. So, there's no limit to how far out there we go in this community. And hey, sometimes the really far out there idea is just far away from where you are, and it turns out to be true. So once you breach that moment where it's like, oh, I don't know what to trust anymore, you're so vulnerable, right? We have this vulnerability. And I wonder how much of that is taken advantage of even by some of these good guys. But let me add to that compartmentalization, right? If we're all like, are there any politicians out there? Let me ask you this one. Does any politician out there tell you not to vote? Probably not, right? And it's like,
I don't think so. Well,
wouldn't that be wonderful? I don't know what would come of that, but
I want to ask you a few questions about that stuff because I don't get into the UFO thing too much, but I will give you this, like, it's hard for me to choke out what I'll even say here about the political stuff is that at a certain point, and people have said this to me before, like I lived in Texas for a while and everybody was Republican. And that's when I realized like Republicans are not conservatives, are not libertarians. Like they're not all the same thing.
Right.
And which I didn't know because I was from New York and I had never met any of those people. So when I went there, I was like, oh, Republicans just vote Republican because they get promises from the Republicans. But people would say, oh, you're so far to the right, like you're coming back around the left, because I was like an anarchist and stuff. But now, I have to say that it's ingrained in me that government cannot be trusted, and that even if it was founded from a place of well-meaning, and then you look into the foundational stories of our country and it's like, maybe they were still working for the crown. And then you look at the Fed and all of that. And then I look at somebody like the guy who was pushed out in a coup in Bolivia. And then like
Jaime Roldos? Was that the 70s?
No. I mean, nobody
recent.
Talks about it.
See, that's what I'm saying. I'm only
ago.
in history. My head does not exist in contemporary times.
That too. No one would know what that was. That's what's crazy.
Fair
like
enough.
There's definitely a U.S. coup like a couple of years ago in Bolivia. And I remember reading about Bolivia. It's like, that looks like a U.S. coup. So I'm looking into it. The only reason I figured it out is like I just recognized the pattern. It was never in the newspaper.
Okay.
And I was talking to some real liberal guy who I like a lot, who is the managing editor of Covert Action magazine. His name is Jeremy Kuzmarov. And I talked to him. He wrote an article about it, and I have him on my show regularly because he's just chock full of all the information. But when you look at some of those guys, they're absolute socialists. So this is a big problem I have. All anti-imperialists of any like intellectual merit seem to be socialists. And I'm like, why do you have to be a socialist? Can't you just, and I asked him that. He was like, well, no, we have a lot of overlap. I know, but ultimately you want socialism.
Yeah. Most of the time you're just riding that pendulum all the way over to the other side. You're not getting off.
So him, but like the Bolivian guy and Hugo Chavez and stuff, and they seem to, I mean, it is possible, like Gaddafi, it's possible those guys had the best interest of their people at heart. Not that their ideologies were right. I'm not saying that, but it is possible that in their delusional ideological minds that they felt like, there are a lot of poor people like Indians that, had a Peruvian missionary call the people who lived in the land, the indigenous people, he called them Indians. So it doesn't offend them. And like, they had no power against Western powers. So you get like, some of these guys are of indigenous origin also. And they're like, well, collectively, we own everything under the ground. And certainly like Exxon doesn't.
Right.
So maybe they were well-meaning, maybe they are not well-meaning. Maybe the reason that like Venezuela is in such the crapper or North Korea like looks so bad to us is sanctions, because China was not a victim of sanctions. They had freaking Mao who killed tens, if not like 100 million people. Not a good guy, not a good system. It to me is either communist or fascist, depending on how you look at it. And they prosper like crazy because they were in on the deal with us. So like I look at some of these guys and I think, yes, you can say, well, just look at Venezuela and hate communism. Look at Bolivia, hate communism. I'm like, well, maybe not. Like, I really don't know because and this is what I'm getting to. What I love and defend, capitalism is, put it in quotes because even capital itself is like fiat money. I can't think of it without thinking of just like a piece of paper and a kid with a green crayon, like drawing a picture of George Washington and like, here, like it's nothing anymore. So I can't even call it capitalism, but I love the free market. I love entrepreneurship. I love liberty. I love it all. But like when I saw the two wings of the same bird with Democrats and Republicans, but it's bigger than that in that there is a global fascism, and there are countercultural people who are out for true communism. And I actually was reading the stuff about Gladio and the Pope and everything. And it seems like socialism was the kind of, quote, capitalist plot against communism, that they were like, well, we'll just tax them and feed them, and tax the middle class and feed the poor. And then we'll keep that communist thing away. Now, why are they really afraid of the communist thing? Like maybe they were sincere. I don't want any part of it, but I even question kind of like the tenets of the economic stuff, like the real pure economics, which I love. And I could do like the maths all day long, but I start to think about,
who's running that show or whatever.
Like,
why are they using the Fibonacci sequence in the stock market? Like, what's that about? Right.
It's just these globalists and stuff. And they'll just, I just don't feel like, I feel bereft of ideology at the moment. Like, I feel like I just don't have a team anymore because it's all such crap. So that's why what I really just like is smart people who come from a good place. And I try not to judge that they think that government is a legitimate way to run a country. For me, that's a radical thought. Like mostly everybody else thinks that's normal, but like a benevolent monarch, that would be kind of my second choice anyway. Maybe this whole thing of like pure anarchy, obviously, I mean, people have thought of this before, just plays into the notion of like world government or the corporate world control, because you've given up any authority that you can actually control.
Yeah, I run into that a lot these days where it's like, well, for a long time, I felt like, okay, my wife and I, my son, we have to get out of here, out of suburbia. We have to go into the middle of nowhere and live there, right? But then, as time went on, as I got more knowledgeable, I'm like, well, wait a minute. What's out there but more land that they own, right? What is off grid when they own everything? And where are what country are you going to, like, it's almost like all the solutions that a normal human being comes up with as a reaction to all these things, all these purposeful actions, all the reactions are getting cornered off. And
then you see like every curtain you pull back is like another curtain. And
it's everywhere.
Even property taxes, like you can't prepay your property taxes.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
You can't prepay them. So they always have a claim except for like Croatia. There's a few places that don't do it. And I was like, maybe you just need to buy land in Croatia, because once you own it, they can't take it away from you. There's no like, because here it just ticks up. Like there's just this debt that ticks up, and you can't get out from under it. But yes, I feel like I do sometimes wonder that, like, as we have all of our political conversations, all the politicians, every single thing is just a layer upon layer of bullshit. And that's why I couldn't just read it anymore. I stepped back from having a daily show because I can't read the newspaper every single day anymore.
Where you felt like you were like reading Distraction or something, or
yeah, I would just read the
almost.
newspaper to find the bullshit. And I was like, I can't just read the newspaper to see, I get it there. I just can't. It was exhausting. And I feel like I really want to get to a deeper truth. And then you've got the problem with the UFO thing. So during lockdown, I started watching the X-Files from the beginning. So I never really, it's so great. And I love sci-fi. I never really watched the whole thing. So I'm on like season 11. I'm with like, Mulder's not even in it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So, but the way they put the layers and layers, it's like at some point, like sometimes there are aliens, sometimes it's the government, sometimes it's both, but they're different.
Yeah.
And so like my layers of bullshit are the politics. With you, how do you sift through that?
So thank you so much for asking me that. I don't think I've really ever been asked that. And maybe my answer will leak into your brain, and maybe you can use it a little bit too.
Yeah.
I come from a very psychedelic background. That was actually my interest in aliens beyond childhood, of course, and the movies that were pushed on us. But it came from psychedelics, because that really opened me up to, I was like becoming an atheist back then. I was about 17, 18 years old. Then I had this experience and I was like, whoops, not an atheist. Don't know what I am anymore, and started reading through all the literature. And for whatever reason, my psychedelic initial experience drove me to psychology, philosophy, religion, and the UFO topic. All of those kind of together, a little bit of paranormal. I was even doing a show that I haven't really kept up with, but it was called The Witness, where I kind of listened to paranormal stories, UFO stories, out of body, near death, and go, how are these the same thing? How are we as humans dealing with the same thing, right? And my constant, have you seen the Leonardo DiCaprio movie about dreams? What is it? Inception.
Oh, Inception.
He's got the little,
that was excellent.
Yeah, he's got the little spinny thing that like keeps him grounded. My grounding was, I think I found it, I would say mostly from like Buddhism, which puts so much focus on yourself and the authentic experience, I guess you could call it. And it's like, I hear people saying one thing about aliens, and then I have my experiences that kind of echo a lot of visitation stories, but it happened from a psychedelic perspective. So right off the bat, I thought, okay, so my experience is valid. That person is probably telling the truth about their experience. And, you get that whole, what is that line that everybody used? Well, I believe that you believe it,
Yeah.
Sure. That's the only thing we can
that
do.
Infuriates me.
I came back from my psychedelic experience having to have faith for the first time in my life, because I couldn't verify anything that just happened to me. And I was like, but I can't prove what just fucking happened. And my brain literally repressed all the important shit, right? So what happened? What, in the psychedelic experience?
Yeah, what happened? Yeah.
I met God or something.
What site was it? Were you in Peru? Like,
no,
was it
Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca?
I was in UMass Amherst. I was in ZooMass.
Wow.
And I ended up just in my head for 8-9 hours. And the message was, it's always been okay. It always is okay.
Wow.
And it always
Good
will
trip.
be okay. It was the biggest hug I've ever felt in my life. It was wild.
See, I felt it was instant therapy. So I felt it was like a Gnostic. I think Gnostic has like two very different meanings, but like
it does. One is paranoid and one is true.
Okay. Well, you have to tell me about that too.
Sure, absolutely. And it all connects. But to go back to your question about how I kind of sift through the bullshit, I go back to myself, and I go back to the human being, almost like Occam's razor in a way. Like, okay, I believe that there's tech going on out here. I believe that we're seeing tech in the sky. I don't think every amateur video is from someone that knows how to Photoshop. I don't think that way. But I also think it's the government. I also absolutely think it's human made. And I'm going to start there. That doesn't mean I'll end up there, because I talk to God under mushrooms. So I'm okay. I watch my visual reality disappear on DMT. Like, something's fucky with this place for sure. But when people go off and say, I met 10-foot lizards, I'm not going to talk about sports anymore. I'm going to talk about this for the next 30 years. And then it's going to just morph into the vaccine stuff. And, it's an interesting landscape. And I think anyone that says they know for a fact what's happening or where the entities are coming from or this or that is lying. And it's very similar to how religions come about. Clearly, these happen because we have an internal experience that is indescribable. But we come back and we have to use our egos and our logical thinking minds to put together that ineffable experience. So it's never, ever going to come out right. It's going to come out maybe with a few close little things, right? Like the urban legend always has a little truth in it. So basically, long story short, I kind of try to go back to the observer mentality of it. And I go, okay, well, if someone thinks they have the answers, they're probably wrong. And if they're coming from the government, who's been lying about this for 70 years on purpose, and in some instances, getting people to go crazy or kill themselves just to keep the charade up, I'm not going to believe any of those people, right? And this is where we will kind of intersect, because we now have government agents, or quote unquote, former government agents, being the good old boys, being the best friends of the UFO community. And we're going to do it right this time. Oh, you're going to reset
I don't know who you're talking about, but like anytime anyone does that.
That's one of them. Yeah. Richard Doty is another one. This might interest you. Richard Doty in 2012 was the star of a documentary called Mirage Men. Mirage Men was this, all right, here's what we did to you guys. We're not like that anymore. And it was all about this man in naval intelligence who discovered this citizen who was living very close to Area 51, Site 4, and was seeing a lot of stuff. So Richard Doty was put in place to send him on wild goose chases and become a buddy. Yeah. And this man lost his family. He lost his living. He lost everything and ended up killing himself. And instead of, it's so terrible, this documentary, because it's basically throwing all that into a little pile and going, see, that's what was happening. Now I'm coming clean. Now Richard Doty, fast forward to 2022, he is a huggable, lovable member of the UFO community. He's on panels left and right. So to me, he told you everything that he was going to continue to do. Right. And it was the documentary was made by a company called Perception Management.
No way.
The only other, they got two documentaries, that one about Richard Doty and another one about Andy Kaufman, the most controversial comedian of all time, who faked his, who knows, maybe it's still him in the costume, right? So it's almost like telling you what they're doing with their first documentary and then doing it with their second.
Yeah, but, well, they do give it dead giveaway. No, anybody who was involved, I can never, you just can't leave the CIA. Maybe some people have, but they're really not. I'm sorry, but they've been tainted and they cannot be a trusted source, even if they are, like, even if they mean to, like, they're going to have to do it in a way that it doesn't involve themselves. Like they should reveal real information to people who can verify it, do behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I cannot trust them.
Right.
So, I mean, what can you do there? That's true. But as far as, so I will give you this. I agree. It's like impossible to know. I don't recall having met God personally, although I'm a practicing Catholic. There is something, like, again, archetypal about my relationship with the other dimension. And I really love, like, I consider Catholicism to be very, like, analytical and, just very, like what you were saying about, you have to, like, fit your experience, your innate understanding into like earthly. So I tried to do, I did yoga. I was doing yoga and I was like, wow, who invented yoga? It's so cool. And then I read, of course, like this is exactly what I'll always do. So I got the Yoga Sutras, which were from 3,500 years ago. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to do this. And I'll tell you, it would take me like an hour and a half to do the dishes because I'd be like, wow, I really appreciate this dish.
Oh, the Zen.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like just loved it. And my kids were like, I'd be like, I am just not worried about anything. I mean, I missed planes. I would forget to make my kids lunch. Like I had 3 kids in diapers, you cannot get Zen. And I was like, oh, this does not work in the Western world at all. Like that is not a way to live. You can't do it. So I had to jam my spirituality into something that was viable here. And I also feel like what they say with your eyes, like if you watch a TV show and somehow like the sound got off sync with the video, you will only notice that after it's like a full second or something. It can have a lot of variation and you will not notice the increment at all because your mind smooths it. And I feel like there's some of that going on because I am very black and white. Like this table is made of table. Like it is not made of imagination. It's made of table. And maybe it is made of imagination, but I don't care at all because it's not important to me at all.
I love that.
I can't figure out where we came from. Like there's Darwin just is mathematically incorrect. Like there's just no chance of that. So now we're stuck with, no wonder they invented Darwin.
Absolutely.
Because they needed something for people to hang their minds on. Because once you lose that, which I only lost, later in life, once you lose that, you're just stuck with like no idea. Like I've got no idea and neither do you. And that's all there is to it. And it's got to be something, I think it has to be something that operates on laws outside the universe because it created, like order doesn't come from chaos. Right. Order doesn't come from chaos. So it can't have just like turned into a human being with abstract thought. Like you can't have done that.
Right. I don't like randomness either.
Yeah. So it has to be something other dimensional. And that's as far as I get. I'm calling it God.
That's fair.
And
no, that's totally fair.
I love you.
I think that's probably the original way or reason why the word God was used. So I go way, way back into history and I've been learning that phonetically God may have meant good and it related to like intention, like gut, good.
Oh,
it was actually pronounced gut in certain languages. So like, right. Yes. And that's where but I think just to have the placeholder is fine. I started using God, the term right after that first psychedelic trip and all my friends were like, excuse me. And I was like,
no, people don't like it. I know.
Doing it. But I never, that's the thing. A lot of people will go directly to a belief structure that already exists, right? After you come back from an experience like that, a lot of, addiction can very easily lead to, finding Jesus and all that. And power to everybody that does it. It's interesting though, because again, that's like that filtering back down into logic, right? From that ineffable, right? It's so wild.
But here's what I did. This is how come I settled on going back to the
that's fine.
Tradition I was born. Oh yeah, no,
you hear enough about Catholicism in this community. You're clearly aware of.
I'm the worst Catholic too, because I'll be like, I don't know if it's right. Like, I don't know if there's a God, but like, I'm just doing, I have a priest who listens to me and I love him. Like I'll communicate with him and I love him and he'll just like, okay, it's okay. But like, you got like a lot of doctrine wrong. And he's like, it's okay that you're not sure there's a God. Like just, proceed with caution when you're actually saying. So I love church. I like to go to church. But what I did was I was struggling with it. And what my mother says, what she did, I was 19 years old and I just decided it was a better way to live. And this is when she's 93 and she like prays for 4 hours a day. And I'm like, wow, you decided it was better. That's it. And
it's like intentional right there, right? Like I'm going to intentionally live this way.
For me, I did. Yeah. She doesn't care about she totally believes in God because she just decided not to stop questioning it. And when I decided to just suspend questioning it, that's a long story I won't get into, but one pivotal element of it was I looked back at what the Greeks said. I was like, okay, let's say Socrates was the smartest guy. Let's like go back and see how much progress we have made in really proving the nature of that thing, God or the creator, the prime mover, unmoved. And in my brief survey, I concluded we made zero progress at all, in defining and proving any characteristics of that other. And I was like, I am not wasting these 80 or 90 years on that. I'm picking.
Trying to figure
Right. So, me like 20 years later than my mom did. And she's like, you're the smart one. I'm like, you're the smart one.
You just
You're
stuck
the
to
smart one. So I get it completely. And it gives me a lot of comfort. And I just stopped, I really fully embrace, is it like Pascal's theorem? Like I fully embrace that I am not worrying about whether there's a God or not. I'm 100% like, it gives me comfort here. This I got from the yoga thing from Swami Satchidananda. He said, or was it Patanjali? I can't remember which one was saying it, like the author or the original, but he said the answer to the question of whether or not there's a God, it's unanswerable, but it is also irrelevant because the answer as to how to live is the same. And that is to free yourself from desire. And you can't, you cannot be happy here. You cannot be happy here, no matter how much you earn and consume and paint on your face or whatever. You're never going to be happy because you're pursuing something that you can't have. That image that you want will always move a little bit further. And then also, you cannot get comfortable with dying if you are attached to these earthly things that you've like cultivated, this relationship that you've put all your life force into. You can't leave it. So the thing, Catholicism is the exact same thing, like materialism, pride, vanity, like these are serious, like they're almost like deal breakers of sin because you cannot, and the same thing like practice. Yoga was like, you have to practice. It's not intellectual. So you have to do yoga so that you can sit there for 3 hours and meditate. Like that was the origin of that. And I thought about it. And so Catholicism requires that you go to mass, it requires that you go to confession, requires this communion and everything. And I thought, oh, I get that because it's practice. And my mother at this stage, because she's like, ascended to the level of, Buddha of a Catholic, she doesn't need to go to church. She just completely lives and absorbs 100%. I do need it. Like I do need that connection. I need communion. Like I totally need that. But I realize those elements are similar across the board and they serve a real function. And so I embrace it, like I'm not going to defend it. Maybe I should defend my faith. I absolutely cannot. I think it's something you have to find inside yourself, but I love it. I'm happy with it.
Beautifully said. That was perfect. And I think you're the first Catholic I've talked to in a very long time where I feel very authentic in appreciating your perspective on Catholicism.
It's hard because
for the most part, I'm like, what about the priests? And
of course,
about this?
Of course, but I was raised by good Catholics who told me since I was a little kid, they were just like, pedophiles and Masons are completely infiltrated the Catholic Church. Like this Pope sucks. And it's like,
that's
my
awesome.
mom, like, I think the Pope drinks baby's blood. She's like, I don't know, but I'll tell you, I've been a Catholic longer than he was. So when he says something wrong, I know it. I know it.
This one, didn't he recently tell all the Catholics that they shouldn't have a personal relationship with Jesus because it's dangerous? It should only go through the church. That's dangerous, right? The
liberals kind of like him, and it's not true. It's not actually true. Like you have to have your ultimate guide. The only reason I could even go back to the church was that your ultimate guide has to be your conscience. It has to be. You're required to follow your conscience, and you have to educate it and inform it. But he's wrong on a million levels, but it doesn't matter because I was also always taught like the church is the people and not those authorities at all. They only have authority in very rare cases, very rare. Like, oh my gosh, my priest friend is going to freak out. If I don't know. The Pope is infallible only in matters of faith and morals, and he rarely speaks ex cathedra. In my lifetime, he has not spoken ex cathedra.
No, he's mostly just talking about UFOs and wokeism and stuff like that. It's weird what's being allowed. It's almost, to me, and maybe you can speak to this as a Catholic, to me, it feels like all the decisions that are being made where I'm reading them, I'm going, oh, that's going to make a lot of people mad. It seems like that's on purpose. Like, because we were talking a little bit about it earlier with anarchy, where you go too far, well, they're getting what they want, right? Like it's that whole thing where you ever heard of revelation of method?
Yes, definitely.
Yes, and
I have a
it's
different take on
flimsy.
that.
I would love to hear it. It's
It's flimsy.
flimsy, of course, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, the more we say our government sucks and the church sucks and this sucks and it's all and it's all, every industry is connected to this monster, so it's all bad. They're just going, good, okay, the country will be dissolved in a matter of moments, right?
Yes,
and then we can move in with our global plan.
That's why I feel like they give us people like Pelosi and stuff to hate, so that we'll throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that's why I defend the Bill of Rights. Like, I'm like, yes, you can throw out the Constitution, everything, but there is somebody waiting for you not to have those rights. Like, it's the thin parchment line between us and world tyranny, is that the whole world looks to the US and that document. And if they convince us to give up that fight, and they really exploit especially African Americans in this country, because, well, of course it would be in this country. So because of the history of slavery and the inherent contradiction in the Constitution. And this is what I got a lot out of my callers in Atlanta, is like, don't be fooled. And this is something like from Bastiat's The Law, although I cannot, maybe it was an impression I got when I read the law, because I did have somebody ask me to like pinpoint the phrase. I can't, but the idea was, don't be very careful not to dispose of your tyrants and replace them with your own tyranny. Like, don't you become the tyrants. So that's what they're trying to get people to do with like I think with the DEI stuff and the critical race theory, they literally say like, we need to have reverse discrimination. We need to, and that is just it's just keeping that framework in place and just changing out, not even the real people in control, but the people who appear to be in control.
Yes. And we continue to think they're in control.
I know.
That's, oh my God, we could peel back the layers. Like, how many podcasts have you heard? Like, yep, these are the definitive 13 families that have been around forever. It's like, well, why would we know those names then? So
I have no idea.
Right?
And I've been trying to figure this out for a long time. I have no idea who's truly at the top.
Right.
But one of the things you said, I think, is interesting. And I really also try to get to the bottom of it. There's so much back and forth, so much infighting. There's so much stuff that I can and do know or think I know about what they're really up to and who's really the bad guy. And they give us so many people to hate, so many villains. I mean, Klaus Schwab is like a straight out of, casting of like the super Bond villain. Like, it's so obvious. And why do they present it that way? And there has to be a reason. And same thing with like probably the UFO stuff. Like, it's definitely their tech, but then they say that there are UFOs. They lead you down that path. Like, it's, I don't even know if it really is the Hegelian dialectic that we all call the dialectic, but there's definitely like that back and forth thing that maybe it just
divide and conquer. Yeah.
The closest I can think is like when they hide the food for a bear in the zoo. Like, some bears won't eat if they don't have to find it. So they hide it. And there's like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not eating anything that's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Like, I'm never eating that. Yeah.
There is a not very popular, a lot of people get yelled at for proposing it. I don't, but I'm in the middle on it. I like it. This very psychedelic idea that beyond all these scales that we constantly argue and converse about, that there's a benevolent force behind all these actions. And it's a very hard pill to swallow, right? And the only thing I can do is go, well, all right. When the lockdowns happened, in a way, they were telling us to go within. You could kind of look at it that way, but it's not that they themselves would be aware of their goodness. It's almost like, and this may be getting a little too psychedelic, but it's like up close, it's evil and there's all these different parts moving. And then the further away in scale you get, it becomes, well, closer and closer to this God's masterpiece, right? So on some level, is that like, okay, let me give you this. I don't know if it's a question or just a statement. We'll see where you go with it. For me, when I took psychedelics, I found the conspiracy theorist was in here and committing all the crimes, hiding all the truth from me, all the things that I was ignoring about my past, patterns I didn't know I was doing. He was in here. and he had to die, right? That's the ego death that you've probably heard about.
Yeah, yes, I have. Although you're gonna have to flesh out what you're saying. Keep going.
Yeah, that's fine. Basically, it's that, you know, any bad habits people have, a lot of times they go into themselves, whether it's through therapy, psychedelics, meditation, whatever, and they have to face those traumas head on and realize, oh, it was like this egoic side of myself that was trying to just keep me safe, trying to keep me in these circles and pretend everything was okay. And it protects us from really learning, like, how terrible things might have been, you know. And not to say that this has to be like your upbringing was terrible. It's just getting through this world, especially how fucked up it is traumatizing. And I think we're constantly as children just pushing that trauma down, right? And for me,
yeah,
I
keep
look,
going.
yeah, just to, I'll flesh it
keep
out for
you
you a
keep
little
going.
bit.
Yeah, no, keep going.
I look at everything fractally. I look at the individual as a very small microcosm to the macrocosm of humanity. And I look at that and I go, are the elites, is the cabal, is that the ego? Is that this collective ego that refuses to acknowledge what it's doing too? Like, that's where we get into the compartmentalization. You know, Ron Paul is a great guy, it seems like, and Rand Paul, they both seem like they're fighting for the right things, right? And maybe they are. They don't even have to be clued into the fact that keeping this country going is, or keeping this government going, keeping this establishment going is part of a much bigger plan, right? You know, that whole idea.
Yes, like when Ronald Reagan and Volcker like jacked up interest rates, they saved fiat currency. Otherwise, we would have gone back to the gold standard. I know. Dude, I'm like,
I have another great example of this.
Yeah.
Trump, right? I saw him one day with like his arm around a Columbus statue. They want to take away your history. No, from the, you know, the torch wavers. It's like, yeah, but you're literally, you have your arm around fake history and you're trying to make sure that people want to fight for it. So it's like, yeah, it's just that constant.
Wait, you're blowing my mind here on like the cabal is the ego.
Hey, okay. All right. Let's go with this.
Yeah. So, because this is what thought just appeared in my mind when you were saying that, was that, you know, what is the cabal? Like, I don't think they're lizards. I really don't. You know, I don't.
That's an ancient symbol of the aware ones, the adepts.
I don't think they're non-human at all. Like, I don't think there's anything supernatural going on with the human beings who are running things. And, you know, maybe I always feel like there's a lot of coordination. I'm starting to wonder a little bit now because of the Ukraine thing. Like, it doesn't really seem like Putin's colluding, although when the Xi Jinping or whatever, however you pronounce the name, and Putin get together and kind of echo the exact same mechanisms by which they're going to control their half of the world. Like, I don't feel like I'm in the presence of heroes, obviously, but are, you know, at that, where you can see that schism like happening. It's like they could have all been friends, but then, you know, somebody went too far and, you know, the Rand Corporation decided to poke the bear. Like, I have a document that from 2019, like they definitely decided to, like, even the way it played out in Belarus, like, go to Belarus, try to buy the guy off. If you won't take the money, start some protests, you know, like it was scripted. So that looks like the place where the rubber hits the road to me. Like, that looks like it. But then you have to, even if, okay, so then you're saying, all right, that's the realm. So we can see the actual actors who are doing stuff, you know, or can you? Like, maybe you can make, like, it looks like you're seeing actual people, like those are players, like real players. And maybe it isn't, but like, what is the nature of that power? Like, who is at the top? How does it like last through generations? Like, what is the mechanism where it's not just like wealth that's squandered? And then the one thing that might be a thread, and I want to hear like what your kind of like a free association answer to that is that in London, if you walk around, like, and I know people live there and stuff, you can see like cornerstones in the square that's still named for that Earl, whatever. And that Earl's family still owns those places, because the way they do it is the way they did Hong Kong. Like, they'll give you a 99-year lease, but they were on the receiving end on Hong Kong, which was, you know, probably hurt. But so if you want to buy an apartment in London, you get a piece of this 99-year leasehold. Like you can trade it, you can buy a place and live in it for 10 years. And then you're giving, I think it works like this. You give an 89-year leasehold. Like it doesn't, because then the original family gets it back. So that is what I always thought was like the inherent problem, where we don't have that. Like our property, we have like a rule against perpetuities, whatever, like our property changes hands. You're never desperate because dead people don't own land here.
Right.
Because dead people own land, like you run out of land quickly. But if dead people aren't allowed to own land, you don't. So in England, it feels like there's an intergenerational like capture of all that is real, like real estate, the real. And maybe that's a piece of like who's really behind it all. I don't know. But like the queen who just died, or they telling us she just died yesterday.
Yes.
Who knows?
Her hologram glitched out for the final time.
Yes, exactly. So somebody just said to me, like, who cares about the queen? She has no power. And I was like, I think she owns almost everything. I don't know exactly, but Well, so I was talking to an Australian guy who's like, oh, I think we're going to probably try to become a republic now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not a republic.
Right.
Oh, did you see that? It was just
I saw that too. I didn't even read the whole article or anything. I saw that.
I never even thought of that. I was like, kind of knew she had like, she could control it, but she doesn't. She only did it the one time about 50 years ago. She just swapped out the president, and people were just like, she's allowed to do that. I'm like, well, now that she's allowed to do it, she never has to do it again, because you're going to call her before you do something stupid.
Right.
So, but anyway, so like there is that intergenerational element to the British Empire, which may still just, maybe as simple as that. And like, they're still trying to subdue Russia and China. I don't know. So now, what do you think?
What am I thinking right now? Well, the first thing comes to mind when you mentioned British Empire, and I don't know how this plays into it entirely, but the Queen has said that she is a direct descendant of Muhammad, and there's a lot of interesting shit.
You sure about that?
I am sure about that quote, but I don't know any of the details beyond that. I will admit, I haven't studied a lot of
me neither.
Middle Eastern genealogy or anything like that.
I haven't studied her stuff really at all. These are just impressions that I'm trying to figure out how it really works.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, because of my psychedelic interest and the symbolism, that darker occult side, I mean, I've been, waiting in the secret society culture for decades, and that seems to be how things get passed through the generations.
Right.
Where the easy example is they're lizards, they're sucking baby's blood and they're living forever. All right. Well, no, they're not, because they're using transhumanism to hopefully be able to do that, to be able to just live forever, But the secret societies.
I did know an old family, a guy I worked with, and he was from a really old European family. And he said to me that, somebody wrote down a long time ago, kind of like rules to live by. And they didn't tell anybody what they were, but they lived by them. And I was like, really?
And then they let everybody else just.
Yeah. Like, did they write it down? It's like, oh yeah, it's written down. Like, can I see it? It's like, oh no. No. First, no, you may not see it. And I believe the original document was written by a woman, but I do not think women are allowed to read it. So there's some
interesting.
Yeah, matriarchal. You could really get into some symbolism there, but it was specific. It wasn't like a general thing. It wasn't like a Masonic thing. It was just specific.
Well, yeah, that would make sense.
And that's kind of interesting. I just think that's interesting. Like that you mentioned that you think it's secret societies. And I feel like if you're savvy and you can put money in trusts and you tell people what to do, like maybe the law isn't going to enforce it. Like we have a rule against perpetuities, but the wisdom, the legacy that you're inheriting, they spend like the way my father instilled in me, like the principles of Bastiat, even though I didn't know it was Bastiat, or, that Ron Paul awakened in us when we were burning dollar bills. I feel like maybe, if that's your priority to pass those values down, you could just do it like that. Maybe.
Very good. I like that.
I mean, and that would plug into secret societies. I think maybe they're parallel.
Well, it does. And it's weird too, because from what I know, and I have honestly, I've said it on the show before, I have a very, very good friend who's a Freemason. He's been a Freemason for a long
lot of
time.
people are
It
Masons,
helped him with his
Yes.
addictions and all that, a lot of good stuff. He's recently thought about leaving because he says they know so much and they don't care to do or help the rest of the world. I don't know if they're
Wow.
evil.
Do you know
or
what level
infiltrated,
he's
but-
at? Because I only know
he's,
like
he's bought he
little
never
guys.
he-
Yeah.
he's the guy that doesn't even want to ascend. He just loves spending time in their libraries and all that. He's a
Oh wow.
conspiracy
I only
theorist
actually I should
through and
say
through.
I only know one guy, and he said
Mm.
to me like, "You know I'm a Mason, right?" I was like, "No, I don't care." He's like, "I mean, because I know you think it badly." Man, I'm just like, "Hey, man, did they tell you that God is really the devil yet? Because
Right.
until you get to that level,
Oh,
I'm
Yahweh?
sure,
Mm.
I'm
I
sure
can tell
he's
you about
just.
that too.
I'm not worried about your like volunteering at the children's hospital."
Right,
You
exactly.
know?
Well, that's the thing, right? You said, it's been hijacked. Things get hijacked. And like you said at the very beginning, and this is a sentiment I love using, I say it all the time, they're always and only going to hijack the things that we find valuable, because they just that's how they work, because and they do it in a way that's so close to what the truth might kind of be that you get lost. Like, this is kind of where I wanted to take us eventually, into the whole political aspect of psychedelics being legalized and all
Yes,
that.
yes. Okay, let's do it. Because when I used to, and I think it was like 2013. So I think my radio show started like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And at the end of every year and the beginning of the year, I would always say like the year and like look back, and then the year ahead, I would make predictions.
Oh, cool.
And so one of them, I remember as soon as Colorado made stuff legal, I immediately was like, every state will fall. Every state will fall. Like they weren't allowing it, and now they're allowing it. Therefore, it will happen, because they don't ever allow, they decide. And there's a purpose. And then as I dug and dug, I found that George Soros had contributed $4 million to the media campaign in Colorado to get pot legalized.
Oh, he's just a nice old guy. He's
Right,
got
exactly. I
arthritis,
said he did not do that because he loves you and wants you to be free. Like, that
Right.
is not why he did that. And so my conclusion was, like, obviously drugs are, I like to get high.
Yeah,
I don't smoke
too.
pot. I like to drink alcohol, and it's fun and I relax.
Mm.
So I think it is actually, I was raised that it was a sin to get drunk. Like, you cannot get drunk, but Jesus drank wine, and you can have a little wine, and God created heaven and earth and wine, and he said it was good.
Right.
So it's fine for me. But so I feel like in moderation, obviously all things, but drugs are dangerous. Like, I'm not sure that like weed that grows out of the ground is anywhere near as dangerous as what happened after they made it legal. And now it's like synthetic and liquid and I know people, I was at the Fare Thee Well, like the last Dead show, whatever, it was long after Jerry was dead. So it's like not the last Dead, it was like the 50th anniversary.
Mhm.
So there were people, kind of my peer group, kind of touch of gray heads, who were there and never had seen any of this vapey stuff before. And a couple of people went to the hospital.
Wow.
I don't
I've
know
heard
like
that.
how different it is. Right. But like, for a normal person who is used to like shit growing out of the ground.
Right. Parent pot.
was-
That's what I used to call it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that this is just, it's like a hard drug, comparatively speaking. And that's, that I lost 2 siblings to hard drugs. Like and other people in my family too, quite tragically.
Mhm.
So it's dangerous stuff. And it's easy to see how the people who control the policies and stuff are going to be able to, plus, not to mention, when you were growing it in your backyard, they didn't regulate it to require, chemical
Right.
treatments.
And they couldn't
it's
tax
just
it or anything
nuts.
like that.
Yeah, it's just nuts. And anything that's taxed is promoted. So I just feel like there was a lot of like dangerous stuff there. And I said, what might happen is they need that money. Like 70% of all the dollar volume of drugs was pot back then when it was illegal. And I was like,
Right.
they're going to switch us to probably opioids. Like I said it at the time, like they are going to, the only way they can make up that black money is by promoting other kinds of drugs. Now, I don't I've seen that did actually happen, that other drugs did rise after that, which is kind of weird, like logically. So I feel like they really know what they're doing. They don't put policies down that don't have a purpose. And I feel like if you read the report from Iron Mountain, they talked about like a euphemized form of slavery. So they would say like, you should be a slave to drugs, a slave to debt. Like they just want you to be enslaved. They wanted people to just warehouse them as soldiers. And I always think that like similarly, they warehouse you in colleges. You leave your family, like that's the new draft.
Absolutely.
And they give you the money, then you're an indentured servant. So like there's a lot of that kind of slavery inherent in the system. And I feel like when they get too many people, maybe too many males, like a lot of times they'll have a war and kill everybody. But if they could just like numb everybody instead, like that was maybe what the pot thing was for. And I've just seen for a while that psychedelics are on the rise. And I don't know psychedelics can be so powerful as a way to find some inner truth.
Right.
But that's it. They have to have a trick up their sleeve. Like there has to be a reason. And maybe it's like the way some people think they intentionally provoke autism, that they make a certain kind of worker. Maybe, people microdose at work. I know people literally microdose at work. Does that like lower your productivity, lower your expectations, or make you a better worker, make you a better slave? I really don't know, but there's no chance they're doing it because they love us and they want us to be happy and enlightened and closer to God. That's definitely not why, but they are doing it.
That's an interesting point about like being a more productive or less productive worker too, because like for a long time, I mean, George Carlin, right? You got the coffee, right? That's all you need to keep you stimulated and working, smart enough to run the machines and dumb enough to not notice the red, white, and blue dick that's fucking you in the ass, right?
I was a banker, and I remember when I was an investment banker, there was people would point out to like the pictures on the walls, like still had like razor lines in it. And they were like, we would do coke all night to get these deals done.
Right.
And I was like, where's all the coke? Like, Nancy Reagan, like no more drugs. And that's when Starbucks took off. So then they had free Starbucks, which will really upset your stomach if you're staying up for 40 hours straight, 40 hours straight. Like I was like, I guess you guys should just bring back the coke. Okay.
It'll be much easier.
Right. You will get more out of me because I am now sick as a dog drinking 15 cups of Starbucks. But I remember like as Nancy Reagan like gave rise to this like Starbucks revolution, I felt like that anyway. But yes, so I feel like it could be, I mean, that seems like what everything is about now, because I just did a thing about the student loan forgiveness. And I was like, his original plan for student loans was that community college should be free. It should be merged with high school, and the counselors in middle school will feed the kids into one of two things. It's like coding or cybersecurity. Like there's just two things. And the analogy, the actual wording in one of the analysis of his original plan for college was, we'll have those counselors work for the students, not the school, the way doctors work for the patient, not the hospital.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I was like, after lockdown, like to think about the concept that your doctor was caring about you above his job at the hospital is just preposterous. Oh. And if he did do that, he wouldn't be at the hospital any longer.
Right.
So I'm positive like that. So it seems to me that the world corporation that is taking over, which is where we started. I was like, I'm a little worried that being an anarchist is playing into their hands.
Right.
But that all policies lead to Salesforce,
Right.
The gig. And maybe it's because maybe it's like STEM training, but for the mind, like you're not going to actually be confident in a civics environment if you are kind of microdosing a little bit because things are groovy. I don't know.
Right.
Sure.
You may want to just lay in a field or something.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I'm going to take the tolls, I'm just going to take the tolls because it's kind of rhythmic. And they say like toll collectors are very happy. Is that funny?
Yeah.
Or like switchboard operators, because they get to like they get to like depersonalize while their body is doing the work. And maybe that helps, maybe that helps.
Mm. So from my perspective, it's weird too, because like, again, the psychedelics have their roots, well, in a lot of places, but including a lot of the symbolism in secret societies and where those lead back to in history. I don't know if you're familiar with a book that came out a few years back called it was called The Immortality Key.
Oh, I have the
Oh,
Immortality
you
Key.
do. Have you read
Yeah.
it? So
Yeah, I
that
started to read it, but it's about the ayahuasca thing and or
it's
whatever you call it.
very, very big. It's a lot of dense material about
Yeah.
psychoactive
I
substances
feel like I
found
would
in
need
old
to.
temples and things like
Yeah.
that, where that this may have been where religion comes from. I don't buy that because again, you and I have talked about that internal experience.
Yes, yes.
You can do it through, if you get hit by a car, you might have a near death
Yes.
experience, or you could take a tab of acid. It's not.
I think
So
the
it's
power
you.
of prayer is the thing that's really convincing me. Like I have found that it's very hard you can disbelieve in the power of prayer if all you pray for is drug addicts because they're resisting it. They're
Right.
closed to grace, which is a Catholic concept. Like if you're not in a state of grace, you can't receive the grace.
Absolutely.
And that sounds like a nasty,
Well-
things to, but it's totally true. I have found that if you pray for something that there's no will rejecting, and I got that. I was listening to like a Greg Carwood Higher Side Chat. Like, I mean, it was somebody who was definitely not Catholic, just saying like he made things happen. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try that. And the power of
Yeah.
prayer, I think, is a very convincing way to see the light, as it were. But
Absolutely.
you were on a
yeah.
roll, and I
No.
interjected.
I'm right there with you because I agree with that 100%. As soon as I got into all this research years and years ago, I was like, oh, meditation. Prayer too? Probably. That makes sense. And all the repetition with in Islam when they're going down and up and down. A lot of cultures do that actually.
What's that about?
That seems like
Because the
an
rosary?
energetic kind of movement or something.
Mm.
And what you said there about prayer blows my mind because it kind of drives home the parallel to the controversial manifestation and all that people think is satanic. It's this idea that you're putting energy into something and you're saying that the drug addicts are kind of fighting against that grace, so that intention, right? And you can fight against things that you're praying for too. If you're praying and in the manifestation language, it'd be like, well, if you've been living a very depressed off and on kind of life. And now you found this idea of manifestation and start saying one day, I'm going to have $1 million tomorrow. I'm going to have $1 million.
Yeah, I think that's what
No.
I was listening to.
You got
the
decades of
manifestation,
that
yeah.
train that are just going to come piling up. Just because you stop
Yes.
doing the negative behavior doesn't mean it's, you know what I mean?
What ends up happening, like basically every time I pray, once I made a mistake, and I'll tell you in a second, but every time I pray, I always end up just saying, well, God loves me, so God's will be done, which is exactly what my mother would always say, God's will be done. But I always start like literally like every night or whatever, when I'm praying for something, I always start with like, oh, I really hope I get that job. And then I'm like, well, it could be like not good for me. So I mean, I only want that job if it's good. And then I'm like, well,
the logical mind.
Yeah. So then I'm just like, okay, well, you love me, so just do what you want for me. So, but one time I prayed for someone to be happy. And what my mother would have prayed for is for the person to be good, to be good. So she was like, well, you pray, that they, find God, or that they return to the church or whatever. And I was like, no, this person's so unhappy. Like, I just want him to be happy. And and it was that person's life just took a turn for the worse. And what he was doing was just pursuing happiness in a way, like pursuing pleasure.
Oh, okay.
So then you had like, late nights, irresponsible behavior, all that kind of stuff. And I just thought, I really should have prayed for him to be good. And then he would have been happy. But
That's
it didn't,
brilliant.
my prayers didn't really impact, I'm sure, because
God, what did I do?
God wouldn't answer a prayer like that, right? Like
No.
he would not answer prayer like that. But I feel like I had done the wrong thing because I have a huge family. So you're always seeing like a lot of people who are into drugs, and they were almost all in New York. And it's terrible. It's really, really terrible. It's like there's something very sinister going on with the drugs. Like there's no way the richest society of all time should have so many. Well, I mean, maybe,
Pendency
but
issues.
the
Yeah.
drugs are on purpose for sure.
Oh yeah.
And I just thought, like, I'll never do that again. Like, I will only pray for somebody to like be good, even if they have to suffer the pain of, quitting drugs or getting on their own
Right.
2 feet or seeing the pain that they caused maybe their children or something. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like
It's all
there's
for a
no
purpose.
easy answer. And that like is one of the reasons that I don't think we're animals. Like, we're not just the evolutionary, like the abstract thinking, fire building ape,
Right.
because we cannot, I don't think we can really be happy without being good, which is maybe why those, the collective ego or whatever we're talking about here, they're so voracious for they almost want to eat your soul,
Right.
because I feel like they cannot satisfy their own. And, maybe there is something to that.
Maybe that's a really good point. And I like the way you keep your prayers simple, and that your mom did that too, because if my wife and I are kind of thinking of like just intentional things to say before bed, when we wake up, or we're just trying to like repeat things, right? Because that's what
Yeah.
the mind does. It just repeats.
I try not to repeat things that are bad. Like,
that.
I'm a
Yeah,
warrior.
absolutely.
And somebody said, like, never think about this. I was like, you're so right. Every time I worry about it, I'm like, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. You know?
Right.
Yes. I anti-manifest all the time.
Yeah, I hear you. Right. Yeah, exactly. Even though there's no way to do that, unfortunately, right?
Oh,
So it's
yeah,
but
right.
it's
Because
like,
you can't think about something.
There's no
not to
negative.
think about. Right. Ouch. Shit.
that's the thing. Like, you can't be in your car going, I am not going to get fired from my job, because then your brain's going to go, what's fired from your job?
Well,
man?
maybe that's why, like,
Fired?
meditation is like emptying your mind. It's the whole Stay
Yes.
Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yes,
problem.
empty your head. Oh, I love that. Just gave me chills. All right, now we're talking Ghostbusters. This is great. I knew we'd cover paranormal at some point.
That's the closest I can get, is a giant marshmallow.
But so my wife will have this tendency, and it's most people's tendency, because we're all so ingrained, whether we think we're not or not, we are or not, in this material minded thinking, that it's like, well, if I think for a long period of time, if I do dream boards about this big giant house and everything, it's like, yeah, those things can maybe work and stuff. I'm not against that idea. Like, I have a friend who claims, shout out to Lehman, he tells me that, him and his wife sat there and would pretend to count money, like a ton of money. And they did it over and over and over again. By the end of that week, they ended up with like $5,000 out of nowhere. Like, they had a check come in for something that didn't make almost any sense.
Wow.
Those stories are wild. I've never experienced them. You know what I
See,
mean?
In my Catholic framework, like, that sounds satanic.
Right. That sounds like magical or right.
It's
Exactly.
like, I was at the Grammys once, and I think it was Pharrell,
Wow.
whose song. Oh yeah, whatever. My husband's job sends to allow for some really cool tickets sometimes.
That's awesome.
So it was, and I always hated that song. Happiness is the truth. Happiness is the truth. I'm like, I think, I mean, I'm not 100% sure that when I die, I'm going to have a conversation with Jesus and he's going to know my name. But barring that reservation, Jesus is the truth. Like, you can't say happiness is the truth. Like, that's the satanic thing where, like, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. Like, happiness is the problem. Not that happiness is the problem, but the pursuit of that is,
Right.
a devoid of the meaning behind it or the goodness in it. So he came out, and I always thought that. I was like, don't listen to that song. It's my kids. Like, they're just like, what? And like that other one, like the guy who says, take me to church, and like he's worshiping his girlfriend.
Oh,
Really
God.
great song,
Oh.
but it's just so satanic. So he comes out and he says, I just want to thank the Lord. And I was like, which way is he going to look? I was like, is he going to look up or is he going to look down? And he didn't look in any direction. And I was like, maybe he's Christian. Like, I really don't know. And I'm not saying, like, he's
Well, right, 'cause
bad
how
if
many
he's not
people,
Christian, but
too?
he'd be bad if he was satanic. I'm not into
Right.
that.
But how many, like, so, and this is controversial in itself, because all the celebrities are evil. I get it. I get it. And
I don't
do
even like bad mouthing a person by name. Like, I feel bad mouthing him. I don't know his character. I really don't know his character, but I just put those two pieces together and it puzzles me.
If I have any layman's perspective on celebrities, and I don't take it lightly, because I do think a lot of negative things about them too, but I wonder often how, first of all, how busy they are. Second, how adored they are, and how everything, they're pampered. They don't do anything for themselves, especially when we're talking A-listers. And Pharrell, man, he's huge. He's massive, right? So that's a good example of this. Britney, all of them, right? I think a lot of them get hoodwinked, like I think like does Pharrell know that saying happiness instead of Jesus, he doesn't know, right? But a lot of us do
and
understand
it wouldn't
that framework
matter.
and we go,
Yeah.
oh, it's
it wouldn't
what
actually
I mean?
matter. It would be better if he didn't know. For them, it would be better if he
Oh,
didn't
absolutely.
know,
A cog in the
because he can
machine, right?
deliver that. Yeah, you're right. That's a great point. It would be better if he, like, for their purposes, it would be better if he was Christian.
Let me take it a step further.
And he
go
did
ahead.
get busted for ripping off some songs. So it is quite possible that he gets fed lyrics and stuff that he takes, is
right. And we
attributed
know
to
that the writers are
himself.
not creative. So we're the creators. So
Do you really think that?
well, I think so. I think religious texts are absolutely true. I just think the context is way off. Just like I think magic exists, but no one's shooting laser beams out of a wand, right?
Yeah.
So
yes. Okay,
I'm
but sorry, do you remember the end of your point? Because don't.
No, it's okay.
You
It's
have
okay.
to.
I'm like this.
hate
I
that.
forget so many things.
No, but I
Probably from the
interrupt
pot.
people, so
That's okay.
That's
I
my
do
worst
too.
nightmare.
This is the best kind of conversation. No, okay. I'll take it a step further. That's where I was going to go.
Right.
I was giving a little bit of innocence to the celebrities.
Yes, fine.
I will take that a big step further. Let's use an example like what's her name from Transformers? Megan Fox, Miss Machine Gun Kelly, and they drink each other's blood and all that kind of stuff. All totally, in the eyes of Catholicism, would be satanic right off. And I don't think it's good. I'm not about to defend it by any means, but I would like to say that as an 18-year-old kid coming back from a 5-gram mushroom trip, not sure what the hell I experienced, started looking into everything, right? Well, that included religion, all religions and all of their histories and this and that. And this won't piss my audience off because they know me very well, but
yeah, no, it doesn't matter.
Again, with that hijacking of the some sort of essence that is not evil, but is kind of, we're lured into the evil way it can be interpreted. I feel that way about a lot of like ritualistic shit that goes on, a lot of the magic side of things. The occult means hidden, right? And the original meaning to me is, well, why did I find that conspiracy theorist inside? Oh, okay. Occult means within. It's hidden
we have to
within.
Now just segue right into the Gnosticism, but I will say, because that's what I was asking you, and you said, well, there's real and there's fake. So that maybe that would be a great place to.
Sure, I would love to
wind it up. So, but I just did want to say that I believe that Megan Fox was a bitch on the set and was just like thrown off the set, not used again. And it might have been like in that moment in her career. I don't know when she started doing bad things, but or things that are controversial. But it's possible that she, moved from the A list to the B list on the, because they say that about Hollywood and Babylon, whatever, that they had, like Stanley Kubrick or there's a lot of talk like that.
Yes.
And if there are those kind of magic things and sacrificial things, and, maybe they were like, look, you're out forever, or you play this role. Maybe. You know what I mean? You get the kind of booby prize, as they said. So tell me, when you talk about we started by saying, I said, that Gnosticism is either Francis Bacon's plot to replace religion with science, or it's me knowing stuff inherently. Like, what is it?
And it can definitely be both, I would say. I don't know. We might even have, if you were interested, we might have to do a whole episode on it.
Oh,
but
let's do that.
I'm down. But just to give you like the cliff notes of it, if I can, like a lot of these stories echo internal experiences that many, many writers have written about from the perspective of their transcendental experiences, right? And it's like this idea. Oh man, I'm not even sure where to start. This is such a deep topic, but Gnosticism itself, man, it's a lot, because we go farther and farther and farther back. You get closer and closer to nature worship, right? Everything is nature. Everything is.
Is that what you believe, or you're just saying that's what you've?
I believe it as I've researched.
Do you also believe it?
Yes. The further in time you go back, Christianity, Catholicism, monotheism there was a beginning to that we can find. Before that, it was all the paganism was kind of rallied. I mean, I would say a hijacking. I think people are familiar with the Council of Nicaea and Constantine.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so
Irenaeus.
let's take all these pagan beliefs and turn them into something that we can work with. And then, of course, we have Jesus being the image of Caesar Borgia. So that's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. I know. And some of it can be flimsy, right?
Yes, that's a good point.
So I always go back to the research I did when I first came back from psychedelics, because a lot of the beautiful, reassuring, life-affirming information I was getting from none other than something inside of me was echoing so much of what, not like Anton LaVey from the Church of Satan said, but like shit that he was globbing onto. And I haven't covered really any of what you asked me, and maybe it is more of an episode. But
question, like I thought I was like, oh, Gnosticism, like I can know inside, but then I have a friend who does a podcast on Francis Bacon, and Gnosticism is really, really bad, and I want to just find like what are the options of what you can think of Gnosticism as.
I think you nailed it. Okay. Which is inner gnosis.
Yes.
And it's really controversial, especially for a lot of thousands of years, the controlling establishment was the Catholic Church. So if you're able to find it within you, as Jesus said, in text that they won't allow into the Bible,
are you talking about like the Gospel of Thomas?
Well, that's one of them. Yeah, the Apocrypha, the Nag Hammadi Library.
Totally convinced that those were authentic.
Real,
are you?
Yeah.
Are
well,
you?
It's interesting because they themselves, those texts, echo religions that are upwards of 10,000 years old.
I don't want to. We can't start another.
We won't.
Hour and a half.
We'll do
another time. But
absolutely,
I did love that Dan. I don't love it now because I don't like what it meant. But the Dan Brown stuff. Like Tom Hanks played him in the movie.
Another hijacking.
Never watched that, but he wrote the books that like Opus Dei was in it, and the
Illuminati. None of us knew what that was.
Yeah, like Gospel of Mary Magdalene or Thomas Rivers. So after that, I got a bunch of books on that stuff, the Nag Hammadi texts and all of that. Like that's what I do. Just like, but everything I got at that time, I didn't realize that like anything they're selling on like a table when you walk into Barnes and Noble is not giving me the answer I'm seeking.
Right.
So I got all these like Elaine Pagel's books and like a lot of like the really popular people who cover that stuff. And that those treatments of it, those kind of pot boilers were convincing. But then I just found like some texts that were transliterated. So just like word for word turned into English, much less convincing. So if you happened upon a resource that you felt was comprehensive and convincing, or not even just convincing, but like lay it all out so you could make a very informed decision about that, I would be interested in that.
I will definitely be looking.
Sent me like not in his image or something, which is like
that just sounds opposite of Christian, like
yes, I don't like I
don't want to go there.
I'll look at it, but I'm not ready for
I find the most important non-Christian texts about our souls and our lives are the ones that are closest to Christian.
Well, that's the thing, like Marcus Aurelius's meditations and the Yoga Sutras are all predate Christ, and they absolutely resonate. That's why that thing is like the answer is the question of whether or not there's a God is unanswerable, but it's also irrelevant. Like the wisdom, the wise have the same advice. It's self-evident, and that's why you have gnosis as something that seems very plausible to me, just as a literal expression.
I'll say this to kind of like bookend our first conversation about this, and of course I just lost it just by saying that sentence. I lost what I was going to say. This is what was I going to go with that? Like the fact that there's a number of texts in the Bible that
you were saying other things that seem Christian almost, even if they're not.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like Buddhism and Hinduism and these other religions that a lot of times in our conspiracy circles we are shown evidence of why they're evil, And it's like, well, yeah, but that symbol isn't what you think it means. So, and so that kind of thing happens a lot. But I was actually going to be able to recommend a book for you that I think will do something in that
Okay.
area. It may not
Okay.
answer all your questions, but it's actually a fiction book. And it's
Great.
called Lamb, Lamb. The story or the gospel according to Biff, Biff, Jesus's childhood best friend. And it is the wackiest, weirdest
Okay.
way. Now, I'm sure
Does
there
it
are
take
Christians out there
lightly?
that know about this book and
Yes.
probably are yelling at me right now. I don't know.
You can't take lightly that which is divine. So
It's very
if
difficult.
it's
It is a comedy.
jokey-
A
no, you're
little
not
bit. It
permitted. Like
is.
that's the definition of blasphemy. So
Oh my God. Oh shit. We can't laugh. That's interesting.
no, you can't laugh at Jesus.
Oh, right. But I
That's
feel
all
like,
I'm
don't you
saying.
think that Jesus probably would have been like, burn that page? Come on, bro. Like he seems so down to earth, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
no,
such-
I got you. I'm not like freaking out about it, but I'm
No, I know
telling
you're
you. Yeah, like I'm just telling you. First of all, there's like two things. It's like my childhood, you're very seriously indoctrinated to things that are taboo. Like things that are
Right.
taboo. Like I don't care if I believe it or not. Like I don't do taboo shit. Like
Right. I got
my
you.
mother, who literally buried 2 kids and 2 grandkids, says like, at least none of my kids takes the Lord's name in vain. I mean, that's like her solace that she is taking to St. Peter.
That's
And
good.
oh yeah. So like I do the same thing in my house. I'm just like, don't say that, like don't
Right.
say that. So I have those taboos. And then my mother is the matron saint. I used to have like patron saints. She's the matron saint. She listens to my show.
Yeah,
My
that's
friend, the priest,
awesome.
listens to the show, and I'll get messages that are just like, you can't read that book. I'm like, well, can I? Yeah. Sometimes it'll be,
Oh God,
like,
protect me.
my mother will say like, it's not that you can't read the book, it's that you can't buy the book.
Mm.
You can't buy the book.
I
like,
almost
if
agree with
it's-
that one. I do agree
Yes,
with that. Yeah.
yes. She would say like, you can read it. It doesn't hurt to read it.
Right.
And but you can, because you're strong. But so anyway, yes, I will probe whether
Yeah, probe that
Lamb-
book. It's very fun. It's very heartwarming, if anything. But yeah, it definitely elucidated a lot of, I think, a Gnostic mentality without claiming it. It was
See, I
probably a
liked
little
the
underhanded.
Last Temptation of Christ, and I'm pretty sure like that I was not supposed to like that.
Oh, right. That was
Because it was
Willem
such
Dafoe.
it was such
yeah.
a good idea. Like the problem, it's very hard to feel like Jesus could really understand what it is to suffer as a human being, because he was free from sin. He understood that he was God. He had a direct relationship with the Father. He spoke to him.
Mhm.
And so to be able to visualize that he was tempted, like that was like an essential element of understanding humanity. And my mother said that when Jesus said, why have you forsaken me? I was like, how is that even possible? She said, because God can't be in the presence of sin. So when Jesus took on the sins of the world, he was alone and he was bereft and he could feel that.
Mhm.
And then he could feel it all. So maybe the
like that.
temptation was in that moment. I don't know, but I'm sure I'm not supposed to get anything out of that either, but I did. So
That's pretty amazing.
I have to live by my conscience as aforementioned.
Absolutely. And I think that's the right way to do it. And
Conscience
that's
first.
why I I often love talking to people with Christian beliefs. I did a show for a long time with my friend Emmanuel, who is very Christian. Well, he says he's not Christian, but he's a follower of Christ, and that's fine. That's
Right.
That's good too. It's weird how I was such a agnostic, atheist type guy growing up, even involved with conspiracy. Yet now I find myself like, where are the Christians? Okay, that's a safe area.
Well,
let's go over there.
Lockdown put a lot of people were like, look, there's no other hope at this point.
Right.
Than, pick your God, but there's nothing here for us.
So if you don't mind, let me elucidate a little bit more on
Yeah.
what I was saying
Mhm.
about when I came back from all those experiences. Because so when I was comparing it to like Megan Fox, this big celebrity,
Yes.
right? And I think she went down to Peru. I think she did an ayahuasca ceremony before any of this Machine Gun Kelly stuff happened. So the thing is when you have that ineffable experience and you come back to your logical egoic mind and you're wide open. You're like, okay, well, maybe everything's true then, right? And you start, it's crazy. But the way I did it was when I would read all these different books, and I read books on Satanism and Luciferian shit and all those kind of things. I didn't buy it for a second, but I took out of it what I had clearly experienced in my own brain. And I also had researched a lot of psychedelic chemistry and found out conclusively that the psychedelics, including marijuana, including alcohol, they hold doors open. They don't, show up in your body with an experience for you. Like, they allow the body to have experiences that the body is able to have, regardless of,
true.
you know what I mean? And
You're right
again,
there.
with the near-death experience or fasting or meditation, doesn't even take chemicals that are outside of you either. So it's like, okay, I'm going to pull a little bit and see what matches up in my internal map on these squirrely ideas that have been put together by egos that came back from that ineffable experience. And I really held on to that because I think that that's where the real truth is. It's like, everybody's going to make an ego out of God in one way or the other. And some of them are going to call it the opposite because they grew up with the image of this guy on a cloud. And then eventually they found out, oh, well, that's the image of Zeus. So obviously, where is this guy? And then once you get older, the fairy tale aspect of religion should kind of fade, and it should be a more profound, I don't really know what it is
It's
kind
now
of
Plato
thing,
called the
right?
noble lie, right? The noble lie was the Greek myths.
Right.
Because it's a noble lie. Yeah.
Right. It's noble. And so it's like, it's not the oh man, yeah, it's just such a
it's
deep
so
topic,
interesting
but
that we're capable of, like, that is a great point. That, and I think of
Right.
that, I was like, drugs, to the extent, that is a freaky thing, to have the capacity to have truly altered perception
Right.
that doesn't like cause brain damage or anything, to have truly altered, that is stimulated by a compound that's present in food that isn't poison.
Yeah, in grasses
There's
and
stuff
other
that you
animals.
smoke. I mean, to me, that feels like both evidence of God and proof of gnosis.
Do you know why people laugh hysterically on mushrooms for the first time?
Why?
Because they go, wait, are you telling me I got to go meet God and beyond the veil and realize all the ridiculousness because I ate a mushroom?
Yes.
And it becomes so insanely funny
Yes.
that you went to take a drug and you experienced the ineffable. And it's like, what?
Because humor is the
Is this
unexpected.
a joke?
Yeah.
It's like the divine comedy of it
Gosh,
all
you
or
might be
something.
talking me into taking a little eating a cap so that I can stop worrying about the stupid stuff in my life.
Well, the
So
microdosing
stupid.
thing is weird because honestly, you don't feel it on a conscious level. So I think probably there's a good portion of people that are lowball tripping and thinking they're microdosing out there by eating a few caps. It's like, whoa, you eat a few micrograms.
Right.
It's like, it's such a small amount.
I wasn't talking about
I know
that.
you.
I was talking about actually like getting that, instant therapy thing. Cause like, I'm seriously worried about the lawn dying. Why do I care about the lawn? I don't even own this house,
Well, so
but like
that's
the lawn
another
is dying. And
aspect of
I
this
literally,
too.
I will walk past it. It's just like, it'll bother me. Like, I gotta not care about that stuff.
I'm sorry that this was me supposed to be interviewing you in the last few minutes.
No, I wanted it to go both ways. I enjoy the swap cast. It's like a buddy dive.
I really
Little buddy dive.
what you just said kind of made me think of something where it's like another part of this transhumanist agenda and maybe why it involves psychedelics. In the beginning, where I came back and I didn't have any guidance, I started to think that experience is what I get to have after I die. So this is not as important. And that's a thing that I actually took from my previous atheism, which was like, they're just getting you to focus on the afterlife. You're not focused on the here and now.
Masses, of course.
So I kind of felt that way about this. And I was like, okay, so you can look up quantum physics, you can look into magic, you can look into all these different areas, and they're going to tell you you're just a meat suit. And what's really important is out there. But then I found alchemy and I went, oh, all the parts are essential. The body's essential. The body is also part of this. It's an equation. And without it, we're not going to be able to talk to each other. We're not going to be here.
The last thing I will bring to this conversation is
yes,
that I think I understand why they're going to legalize mushrooms.
Okay.
Because I was thinking, be careful. Watch out for the messages that they are sending at that point. What are the subliminal? And now I'm realizing, like, we will be more susceptible to a very curated type of propaganda
In VR.
Ugh. All right.
Now VR is pretty convincing as it is, so maybe we should leave it there, and maybe
Yes,
you and I
let's
could do
leave
this
it
again.
There.
This was
absolutely.
great.
Yes, and anything that you think of, like, jot it down, and we'll do that the next time.
Hell yeah. I will look for some cool references to explain better what I'm trying to get across, because there is a whole world.
No,
that we
it's
could look
huge. It's
into
too big a
there, you know?
subject. It was just a little
Absolutely.
sampler. I like a little sampler.
Yeah, honestly, I'll tell you this. Shout out to Joe from Legit Bat, good friend.
Yes. And
I actually
sorry,
told him
Joe.
I was having you on this Friday, and I was like, dude, I'm a little nervous because I feel like our subject matters are so vastly different.
I did notice
I'm
that.
worried I'm gonna run out of stuff to ask Monica or something. And he was like, absolutely, do not worry about that. She can riff with the best of them on anything, and you've absolutely proven that. You are
Are
awesome,
you sure he
and I
didn't
really
say
appreciate it.
she talks constantly and you won't even get a word in edgewise? Come on, I know Joe.
No, because he would know that I would have to say, well, that's me too. So it's just going to be, you know, I thought this was great. This was a great
me
introduction
too, because I
to
did
each
think
other.
of that. Well, once I was starting to listen to you, I started thinking, well, I'm happy to go on the show, but I want to hear what he has to say. So that's before we started. I was like, I hope we can go both ways, because I don't know enough about that stuff, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think we find ourselves in a unique comparative position here, where you're someone that I can trust answers to when I ask political questions because I don't know anything. Whereas, like, I haven't been able to go to my dad for a very long time because it's American politics is his sports team, basically.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I can't get any real answers at just fighting. So, so it's
So
good that we have this very vastly different perspective on things that we can kind of come together and maybe in an alchemical way create that third idea, you know?
Right on. Let's keep trying. I just cannot wait to hear what my Catholic family and friends are gonna be like. That guy's clearly.
Oh God. Well, you know, just a message to them. I really and truly, to the ends of my being, really appreciate what religion, especially Christianity and Catholicism, has the potential to do for people. And I think it's like, it can be a hijacking, but I think that's because of how powerful those messages are. So
that's true for absolutely.
Hopefully that saves me from your family.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. No, it's fine. It's just funny because the people, they love me. So they're not going to be mean to me.
Right.
People don't love you. It's like, but they know they love me. It's going to be fun. Okay. I don't mean like everyone loves me, but the people who are going to respond are going to do it in a way to help me understand better what I did not convey a thorough understanding of. But and then I'll bring it back. I will bring those comments back the next time we talk.
I'm all about
the
opposite opinion. I mean, I'm studying some ancient history right now that's very controversial. I'm like, please, if anybody can debate it, I need that. We need to chisel this out, right?
So tell us, because I hopefully can put this on my feed. Tell people who you are so that they can enjoy the sampler and know where to go for more.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate that, Monica, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I'm Andy Rouse. You can find me at the Deep Share podcast on social media. I'm just the Deep Share. Or if you have any questions or you want to, you know, send your pitchforks my way now, just contact at thedeepshare.com. So that's awesome. Thank you for doing this. It's a swap cast now. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. It's a buddy dive. I call them buddy dive.
And equally, for anyone living under a rock that is unfamiliar with your show, please let my audience know where they can find you too.
Thank you so much. So in socials, I'm at Monica Perez Show, because that used to be my radio show. And I was on the Propaganda Report. I did the Drive Time News Blast, which is a daily show every day, but I cannot do the daily show anymore. So I do deep dives. You can get it at monicasdeepdives.com or Deep Dives with Monica Perez on your favorite podcasting platform. But I'm on Twitter pretty much every night. So if you want to talk to me, I'm there. And I really do like to get the feedback. Just, you know, be nice.
Definitely. Yeah. I love getting feedback on Twitter. Like that's the craziest community I think I'm a part of. So.
Well, my son was telling me, he was like, oh, it's a cesspool Twitter. And I was like,
It
no,
is.
I love it. I love it. And he's like, that's because you're shadow banned. Like you don't, the only people who can talk to you are people who are literally going to your feed every day. I'm like, oh, well, that's great. Great.
Yeah, I love this little echo chamber. You know, it's funny that they've demonized the idea of echo chambers. It's like, well, the more people think a certain way, the more they're going to get things done, right?
Yeah, like it's a community at this point.
Well, I love our community. And this was excellent. And Monica, thank you so much for being here with us. And we'll do this again. We'll have a part 2 at some point.
Super fun. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And tune in next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Deep Share Podcast. If you want to hear more, then hit that subscribe button. Follow me on all the social places. And remember, think for yourself, but don't always believe what you think. Till next time.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, vegetarian. Enough, I get the point.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.
What do we know? What do we know? If I know what we know, then I can tell you what we know, and if someone else knows, okay?